Well, you guys should know this series called Boost Up that has been created by the association Danish Entrepreneurs. Actually, is the brainchild of Veronica, so she's being very, very modest here, but she was the one who came up with the idea of the whole series. Today, this is the first episode where we're going to be talking about social entrepreneurship. You know, when you are not driven by money, but by desire to help the world and whatnot. This series has been brought to you by Aalborg Institute for Development, together with various other organizations. Today, we have a collaboration with Last Week in Denmark and NABO. As Elizabeth said earlier, she's our, well, as Elizabeth uh, said hi earlier. She's our esteemed guest for tonight. She's the founder and CEO of Nabo, the app that you're going to hear soon more about. And in just a couple seconds. If you don't know, and if you cannot see my name on Zoom, I'm Narcis George Matake. I'm the founder of Last Week in Denmark, which also makes me sort of a social entrepreneur. And I'll also be talking about Last Week in Denmark today. But before we look at the agenda for today's webinar, I would like to invite Elizabeth to say a few words about Nabo, who she is, and then I can continue the conversation. Hello, Elizabeth, and
Hello.
welcome to the webinar. Even though you have joined a couple minutes ago, this recording.
It is never too late to say welcome. And welcome everybody who is joining as we get started. My name is Elizabeth. I'm an American living in Denmark for almost 8 years now. I came here because I was offered a job at the Lego Foundation, which is why I'm in the middle of Jutland. That's where Lego headquarters is. And about a year ago, I left and started Nebo. Nebo, if you are not a Danish speaker yet, it just means neighbor in Danish. And the idea behind it is to create a space where Danes and internationals can come together and co-create a community of belonging. So there's lots of resources for, particularly for internationals, to help them get settled and to integrate and feel that they really belong here. And I think in addition to streamlining a lot of those resources and events and information and community and connection, all of that is provided in the context of a really warm community that was designed from the bottom up for belonging. And I think that that's a really special part of what Nebo is offering. So
I
that's
mean,
me.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for talking about Nebo. You know, when someone starts a new project and they work very, very hard at that project, they tend to think that the project is more important than they are. So they tend to speak a lot about the project. But Elizabeth, who are you? Not Nabo, but who are you as well?
Well, that's a philosophical question, isn't it? Um, who am I? I grew up in Texas,
Okay, American.
and then lived all in different places in the United States, mostly in the Washington, D.C. area. So my background is actually as a researcher. I have worked at the intersection of policy and research and practice because my whole life I've wanted to do something related to social impact. And I started my career at Sesame Workshop. If you know Sesame Street with Elmo and the Muppets, I spent
Okay.
some time in New York with Elmo as a colleague, which is, you know, a hoot in meetings. Um, and then got the job at the Lego Foundation. So, and I've got two little boys that I mentioned if you were here before we got started, who you might hear at some point trying to murder each other. Hopefully not. Um, and I love being in the woods. I live in the woods, and it's the best. I I need trees. I need really tall trees around me.
Wait, tall trees. You're living in Denmark, right?
Yeah, but I live in
What?
the woods. There's lots of woods in Denmark.
It's just when you imagine tall trees, you imagine mountains, and then you imagine, well,
That's true.
not really Denmark, but okay.
Finland is really flat.
Yeah, well, yeah, especially Billund. I'm surprised you guys have still forests in Billund. The farmers did such a good job at cutting everything around there that I'm shocked you found that one patch that still has trees around. But you know what? Trees are
It's a
coming back.
unicorn. What can I say?
Tree is the new orange, right? Then a quarter of Denmark or three
Yeah, yeah,
quarters of Denmark will be
yeah.
covered by trees. if the government plan becomes reality. But thank you so much, Elizabeth, and welcome to this short webinar. For the ones who don't know, Last Week in Denmark is a free weekly publication in 8 languages that basically keeps you updated on what happens in Denmark politically, economically, and socially. You just literally just type in Last Week in Denmark on Google and you can find it on Substack, put your email in, and then you're good to go. Every Sunday at midday, around 12:30, depending on, well, how fast I am at publishing, you will get your email. Don't worry, you always will get your email. We have never missed unless we have announced a hiatus, but otherwise we have been running it for 5 years now. So yeah, it's became let's just say a big part of the international community in here. I know that some of you might, because I can see already from the chat, some of you already know, of course, that the newsletter and the podcast you got here because of that. But today we're not going to talk about how many followers we have and how many people are in our community, but I want us to talk about why it exists and what it taught me about social entrepreneurship. So around 2009, I was the second generation of Romanian students who came to Denmark. We were 300 in total international students in Aalborg. Imagine that today Aalborg has almost 15% of the population, which is international. Well, backtrack to 2009. I just want to say fast forward, Jesus. Backtrack to 2009, and you will see that back then we were maximum 2,000-3,000 people, which is less than 3%. You can say that in the last years, Aalborg has become very international. And you have to understand, 2009 Denmark was a very, very different country than it is today. So if you didn't try to fit in, if you didn't try to understand the system, you will be easily left on the side. Especially as a European, they will just see us as temporary. You came to study, you will go away. No need to bother with you. You were not in a situation where we need to talk to you. So that's when I realized that if you don't try to understand the Danish society, if you don't try to learn how to navigate it, you will not live long here. You will not have you will not be able to put down any roots, and you'll not be able to actually see yourself in this country. It's no wonder that, to be honest, most of the colleagues I had back then, very few of them are still here today. Not many managed to survive more than 5 years. And many people blame the weather, but to be honest, it's not really the weather. It's basically the feeling of isolation. Many internationals feel isolated, no matter if they have a job or a family or a house, even like if they acquired a house. It's not enough. Simply, I know Elizabeth knows a lot more about that, but about this feeling of belonging that's missing, it's actually a pretty big one. And that's kind of what pushed me into this. I realized that we as internationals are so divided, and the moment I got out of university, I basically lost my support group. That was the university life. We had our own, let's say, mini world down there with the university parties and university clubs and whatnot. So the moment I got out in the real world, I realized that people will start either disappearing, so there'll be fewer of us, and then they will start segregating into the different ethnic groups that we're part of. And I didn't really care much for that. So that's why I realized that, wow, okay, we don't actually have an international community in Denmark for adults, for people who are not students. What happens after you're not a student anymore and you decide to buy a house and settle down here? And let's just say you don't have the chance to actually get into the Danish circles, because if you look at the 70s and you look how well the Turkish minority has fared, they haven't fared very well. I mean, they try very hard to get them to, let's just say, assimilate into the Danish society. They failed because they focus so much on jobs and financial well-being. They focus so little on belonging that it failed. Obviously, a lot of the children born here from that minority, they don't feel like they belong here, and they feel like excluded from society. So that's basically gets me to the idea of why I started Last Week in Denmark, is because I felt like we need to build a bridge. I felt like if we manage to somehow create a common vehicle where the internationals kind of read the same thing at least, we could be able to use that as a base to build later on. If someone else comes with an idea like, hey, let's build a association for internationals in Denmark. Okay, how would you reach all internationals if there's no vehicle, right? If there's no communication channel built ahead. So I'm not saying I'm going to do that association, but I want to create the breeding ground for it to happen. So that's kind of why I'm doing this. And I think today we got to a place where I can say we have, let's just say, given birth to a lot of other initiatives within the international community, and we are helping every other initiative that there is out there without seeking profit to try to get it and become bigger, give it like a little bit of a push, because we have over 30,000 people that read us every week in all the 8 languages. And I mean, this is proof that one person with a laptop and a question can create social impact, right? That's why we're here
There's just,
today.
I just want to say that you actually articulated really beautifully the name Nebo. As I said, it means neighbor, and I was really motivated by a lot of the same things that I could see that there are a lot of international people who are living next door to one another or next door to other Danes, but we're all isolated, and I wanted to find a way to help people to start acting more like neighbors than just people who live next door. So to like build that bridge, give that structure to get people behaving in this like very caring communal way. And I should also say that NABO has really benefited a lot from the work that you have done, Narcissus, from last week in Denmark and also from the Aalborg Institute for Development. And I can maybe say a little bit more about that later.
No, I'm glad to hear that. And exactly, Elizabeth, this is what I'm saying. Social entrepreneurship is not about big funding or flashy branding. It's basically about frustration. You notice something around you that just doesn't work the way it should, and you dare to ask, what if I did something about it? Don't
Yeah,
wait for someone else to do it. And
yeah.
that's exactly what fuels a real social entrepreneur, if any of you are in here today. Let's go on to the agenda for today.
Can you see that?
Mm-hmm. I can see it. So we're going to start with social innovation. Basically, we're going to look at the definition of social innovation and look at some examples of what it is. Then we're going to look at social versus traditional entrepreneurship. So how is it different to be a social entrepreneur versus being a normal, well, a usual type of entrepreneur? Then we're going to have Elizabeth take you through the key capacities, like what skills one should have to survive as a social entrepreneur, and some tools and methods that she has used, for example, during the creation of Nebo. Then we're going to have a page with resources, Q&A, and we're going to say thank you so much for today. As I said, it's going to be a quick 1-hour webinar that we're going to try to go through the next, well, 42 minutes. Let's go to the first one. Social innovation. So, what is social innovation? Well, it's literally in the name. It means finding new, creative ways to solve social problems, right? It's, as I said earlier, it's when someone sees that something isn't working for a group of people, and then you wait. You don't wait for it to change by itself. You decide to do something about it. I think that's the key here. You see something you don't like, and then you take action. And this can be anything. It can be a new service, it can be a tool, it can be a program, it can be even a different type of business model that creates positive change in areas like education, health, the environment, right? These days with climate change, employment in some countries, not necessarily in Denmark so much because we have the lowest unemployment rate in history, or even inclusion. And this is a big one, I guess, for us as internationals. So what makes it innovation? Well, it's not just that it's just new, right? It's not just, oh, it's new, it's innovation, but it has to work basically better than what existed before. And to be honest, most social innovation comes from people who are directly affected by the problem, or at least are in the same circle with it, so that it allows them to understand it and it allows them to come up with ideas. If we are to think of some examples of social innovation, I think the one that most of you know, it's Too Good To Go, right? Uh, it allows you to buy food that was unsold, that it's either sold at the end of the day or is being thrown away. It's sold to you at a discount, and in this way, it works. It basically reduces food waste. It helps with the environment. That is a social enterprise. Of course, there are many examples, especially there, like for example, you don't have to always be about these big apps that everyone knows. For example, there is this campaign in UK called the Street Doctors. They literally train young people in areas that are affected by knife crime to deliver first aid in emergencies, right? So they want to reduce the number of people that will die because they know that knife attacks happen often in there. So therefore, someone could intervene and save someone's life. Uh, that that already is not built as a business, right? It's built in a different way. Uh, if we want to look at the developing world, right there, you can see probably the biggest thing that, in my opinion, the biggest thing that happened there was when they managed to allow people to send money via normal, like basic phones, like absolute basic phones. They literally allowed this way people who before couldn't dream about a bank account to have access to them. And then, of course, you can also look at last week in Denmark as an example of social innovation, because it's not about being high tech or funded by big institutions. It's it solved the gap, right? In that was missing before in communication, in trust, and in community. It's just that's what it should matter when you create social innovation. You don't have to be, I don't know, inventing the next iPhone when you're dealing with social innovation. You just have to uh, think about meaningful impact when you use different simple tools like mobile phones, newsletters, or apps. And talking about apps, Elizabeth, what about Nabo? How does it fit in this definition of social innovation?
Um, well, I would say I definitely fall into the category of social entrepreneurship and not traditional entrepreneurship. I have no background in business. So for me, the motivation really came from, like you said, sort of frustration, a sense that there is a need that I see present all around me that isn't being met well enough yet, or there's a gap in how it's being met. And um, I'm not interested in, filling some hole in a market. I'm thinking about um, how I want to support the people that I see around me who need help, who need that support. So it actually started with I noticed that I was spending a lot of my free time supporting international people because I had information from being here for a while that they didn't have and couldn't find. So I started, writing up little guides for colleagues and things like that, and felt like this is something that should be available to more people. So it kind of started that way and started with community events and things that I had started to do around town. And I realized that I wanted more people to be able to access that kind of community and, the getting information, but not just, from like the New in Denmark website, but from somebody who cares about them, and who's willing to like follow up and help them through a process so that they're not alone.
Okay, wow. I mean, it's interesting how Nebo started, because Last Week in Denmark has kind of a similar story.
Mm,
It was actually it's a child of the pandemic, you can say. It
mm.
was during the pandemic that a lot of people were in Denmark were struggling to follow the basically daily changes to,
Ah,
can you go to work? Can you not go to work? Can you wear a mask today? Can you not wear? What can you do? And a lot of people were freaked out. And because I was, well, I have a background in politics, so a lot of people would just look at me and like, okay, give us an answer. So I would start answering those people, and then I was like, more and more people are asking me questions. What if I just write every day like a daily summary and put it on the main groups, and then just let it be there for a while? And then as we were getting close out of the pandemic, I started like for example to talk about the budget law, that okay, will the
mm,
government use the money for this year, or if there will be like a bigger law that will affect all the internationals, I would usually introduce it in there. And then someone said, hey, why don't you make this into a newsletter? And then I said, okay, let's try it on a weekly basis. So we moved it from there to LinkedIn. the first time it was launched on LinkedIn, it had around 3,000 readers. So it started very strong because people were like, wow, okay, we want to have this. And then from there on, you can say that it was actually the users who just literally guided it further. Someone said, hey, start sending it through some monkey share platform. And then someone said, hey, you can maximum be 2,000 subscribers on that one. Why don't you go somewhere else? Let's go to Substack. Someone said, can we make a logo for you? Yes, of course, please. So everything happened driven by people, and sometimes people will be a bit they will ask me what is the vision behind, and I'm like, I don't know, it depends on the people that are reading it. you know because it started literally with just daily updates about corona laws, right? What's happening and how you should be, can you go to work or not in the next day, and then out of sudden it's just like this weekly newsletter that we're doing. So yeah, definitely. I can really resonate with your story, Elizabeth. And I'm wondering, actually, have you thought about transforming your Nabo into a social enterprise?
Social enterprise, explain what that means first.
Well, basically, a social enterprise is an enterprise where your main aim is not profit, but you're still organized like a business.
Mm-hmm.
So you know already that the profits, or yeah, the profits generated uh, are going to be reinvested in the purpose of the company. So
Right.
you can still have like a higher purpose, but you're still working like a company.
Right. So
Um,
it's like it is a business, but it is structured in a similar way as a nonprofit without being a nonprofit.
exactly.
Yes, I have thought about that, and I'm kind of weighing the options right now for that reason. So I think one of the things that's tricky about working in the social innovation space is that because it's not about making money, it's about serving people. I think a lot of social innovators feel pretty strange about charging for what they offer. So, I mean, if you think about the training people in neighborhoods to prevent, stabbing deaths by intervening early. You don't want to,
Hmm.
it feels wrong somehow to make them pay for that, right? If you have the knowledge to save a life, like why would, yeah, it's hard to imagine paying for it. So, um, I think the same has been true for me with Nebo and trying to kind of navigate the the need for being able to pay my bills and be able to make sure that the organization has what it needs to be sustainable and at the same time this sense that I want to be like a good servant for a community and make sure everybody has access. That's just it's such a hard line to walk. So I think listen to what Narcissus just said. There are a range of different models that you can find and that Denmark will support for you to choose from. And think hard about that. And try to find some resources on the internet to decide which one's for you.
Exactly. But unfortunately, just to be clear, there is no such thing as a social economic enterprise as a type of registration. You
Right.
still have to either choose to be an association, a foundation, or a proper company, and then you
Right.
can apply for a label. There's actually this RSV. It's a label that shows others that whatever money you make is for the benefit of society, and you're going to reinvest the profits for a social purpose. You're actually allowed to use the RSV logo. It's like a proper brand. And in Denmark, it's all about trust with everyone. It's about building trust with customers, partners, funders. So having the RSV logo can be quite of a, let's just say, helpful push in the beginning. But of course, to be able to be categorized as a social enterprise, you need to actually have a purpose that's socially beneficial. So it needs to be about, health, employment, cultural inclusion, environmental protection, something that is good for, if not all of us, but at least a lot of us. You still have to kind of have economic activity. So at least 10% from your income should come from sales, because a lot of associations live out of grants, right? But in a social enterprise, you should also consider having a product that you will sell. So, for example, think about it in this way: if you have a pizzeria, just as pizzeria, you opened the pizzeria and you decided to hire ex-convicts, right? You give ex-convicts a chance to be reintegrated in society. And then with the money that you make from that, you reinvest in programs to de-radicalize young people and try to keep them off the streets, right? Try to not allow them to be in bad neighborhoods or bad influence areas. So that is an example of how a social enterprise would work. It still has to be independent of public control, so it still has to be run by a private person, and it shouldn't be run by the local municipality. And of course, when we're talking about profit, it needs to be reinvested, but when it doesn't have to be always fully reinvested. It can be like half of it is reinvested for the purpose and half of it is it's kept by the owner. So it's all about finding the balance, to be honest, because as I said, there is no actual registration way to be a social economic enterprise. It's just a label. Let's go forward then with the next.
So I'll take over for a couple of minutes. We wanted to talk a bit about the key capacities, like what kinds of
I think we had still the differences between the.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. Did you want to see that?
Yeah, we still have this one because
Yeah.
I think it's important to go a little bit at least through it
Sure,
before
sure.
we jump into the next part, because it's still about the mindset, right? If in the traditional entrepreneur side you think about, okay, how do I make money to solve a problem? In the social entrepreneur side, you are like, okay, how do I solve a problem even if the money isn't the end goal? I mean, both of them want to create value, but one focuses on financial value and the other one focuses on social value. So here we can look at it like this. When you're a traditional entrepreneur, I keep saying traditional, I literally mean any other entrepreneur besides the social ones. You see a need, you develop a product or a service, and then you aim for profit. Very clear, very clean. When you're a social entrepreneur, as we have pointed out earlier, you start with a social challenge, with a frustration, right? You can be unemployment, loneliness, discrimination, food insecurity, and then you build a solution around it. So, just to give a clear example, a bakery in Copenhagen might sell pastries to make profit, while a social enterprise bakery will train refugees and use the profit to fund integration programs. And then you wonder, okay, but how do you measure success on a social entrepreneurship? Well, it's the same way. You can still look at revenue, you can still look at growth and market share, but you also have to look at a new thing called impact on society. Have you managed to have fewer homeless people on the streets? Are there more young people in education? Are the people in your community around happier, healthier? That's how you track basically success as a social entrepreneur. We talked about profit distribution earlier, that it's usually reinvested, but not necessarily fully. And let's just say the advantage that a social entrepreneur has in front of a usual entrepreneur is that besides the usual bank loans, venture capital, your own capital funding model, you also have access to grants, crowdfunding, donations, impact investors. So there is a lot more opportunities to attract funding because you have less, let's just say, less focus on creating money, but you still have to fulfill your, let's just say, desired impact. So then you can pull in some money from the national agenda. Let's say that your agenda and the EU agenda or the government agenda or the local municipality agenda are similar. They have allocated some public money to fund initiatives that will make an impact. Therefore, they'll give you the money, you go do the impact. That's kind of how it works and how you attract public money. So that was it from my side, and I'll let you now continue with the key, with the key capacities.
Key capacities. Yeah. So I think the key capacities we're primarily probably talking about the founder, but I think it also is, related to the people that you choose to join you and be on your team. I think empathy would be the first, just because as Narcissus said, often the whole reason for starting up a social impact organization is because you feel yourself, you're like directly impacted or very close to someone who is directly impacted um by a problem that hasn't been solved well. And so that empathy is a huge motivator and a huge drive behind why people put in the kind of work that they do, and often, for many years as volunteers or unpaid. Um, I think that that is sort of like the kind of core of the kind of person who gets into this work. But also I think it's really important when you start thinking about design, because if what you're trying to accomplish is like a human-centered solution to a human problem, then you really have to be thinking in terms of the experiences of the people that you want to serve, and trying to understand that experience and that challenge as best as you can, so that when you create a solution, it's not just another solution that isn't good enough. So really kind of getting down into that nitty-gritty and empathizing in a really deep way. Creativity, obviously, if you're coming up with a solution that hasn't been there before, you have to be creative. Often what you're frustrated about and what you're empathizing with in terms of a problem is that whatever solution does exist, if one does exist, um, it's not meeting the need well. Usually that's going to be, like it could be a systemic failure. It's a way that we're used to doing things that is no longer serving us. In order to notice that the way we're used to doing things isn't serving us, you really have to be able to think outside the normal box, and identify where it's not meeting the need. Um, so then resilience, this is the tough one to hear. Like it feels really good to be like, yeah, I've got empathy, I've got creativity. Resilience is the one that's a little bit of a downer, because social entrepreneurs, like any kind of entrepreneur, you are going to hit some really big rough patches. You're going to face setback after setback. You can think of them as setbacks. I try to think of them as learning in the design process. So you heard Narcissus talk earlier about how last week in Denmark, sort of it's like its path was really windy, from one thing to the next to the next. Oh, I'll try this platform. It turns out 2,000 users is the max. Okay, I got to switch to this platform. And he's probably worried about taking all of these readers with him in each case. Um, so I like to think of it that way. It's not about a setback or a failure. It's about, I just got more information about how this needs to work better, because the way I was doing it wasn't meeting the need, right? That's the whole point. It's about meeting the need. And so you have to put your ego aside and think of yourself as a designer, giving an input, getting feedback, and redesigning in the way that's going to work best for the people you're trying to serve, or the issue you're trying to serve. So you can think of that as resilience, or maybe just having like a design mindset. And then teamwork. Um, a lot of these things cannot be done alone. And in the case of a lot of social innovations, you end up working with a lot of volunteers. I do. I know that Narcissus does. These are people who similarly feel a lot of empathy and feel creative. They might feel frustrated and want to do something about the situation. And a lot of people show up who want to support and want to be part of the solution. And I think that that's really important, that when when you've got a social innovation, it's going to work best if a lot of people feel kind of ownership for it. A lot of people feel that they were part of the solution. That's important, but also in terms of collaboration across sectors, I have found that the thing that works best is to have a really authentic collaboration where you're actually working on a project together. The best experience that I've had with Nebo so far has been working with my team of volunteers on specific projects, and working with various partners on putting together a big event around belonging. When you're actually working on a project together in that authentic way, those relationships get so strong so fast, and it's actually kind of a like a a way to fast track in a way the networks and connections that you need for your organization as a whole to succeed well. So I really recommend finding common projects, for example, with other organizations in your sector across sectors that everybody can believe in, where you kind of like you have that overlap and do a really purposeful short-term project together so that you build that trust and the collaborative relationship. And Narcissus, is there anything about what I've just said that really resonates for you, or like the experience that you've had with Last Week in Denmark or any of the other organizations you've started?
I mean, for me, it's a bit like it creates me flashbacks because I have been part of the volunteer world since, well, literally since I came to Denmark. I
Yeah.
discovered volunteering here. I was not aware of it in Romania.
Mm,
Here I discovered it. I started by being part of multiple organizations from when I was like 19. I realized that this is like the cornerstone of Danish society. It's every
mm,
Dane is part of two, three associations at least. Every city has around 1,000 associations. Power in Denmark is measured by how many positions of leadership in how many associations you have. The most powerful
wow.
person in Denmark has 268 positions. Uh,
Ooh,
Only in Denmark you can have people who are professionally board members. That's all they do,
mm,
all day. They just go to meetings in various associations because not every association is poor.
mm,
To to put it clear, some
mm,
associations have managed to get some significant amounts of money from various directions, and that allows them to literally have very professional boards. And those boards have to deliver, of course, on a bigger impact scales. That's why you pay them. Uh, but it's just another level, you can say.
mm,
Uh, in terms of capacities, I would say that for the founders, this is very important for the founders themselves. You need to stay, you need to basically decide on a goal and just stay true to it no matter what. Let's just say, like I said to myself, like you asked me what is the vision of Last Week in Denmark. The vision of Last Week in Denmark is to publish every Sunday a newsletter. That was the vision. Point. Everything else is extra. The whole universe that was created around where there's like around 100 volunteers. It's fantastic. It's great, but it's not what I put myself in mind. In my mind, I said every Sunday I must publish this newsletter. That means every evening I must read enough news to be able to process them and have what to write on Fridays. Therefore, I have something to publish on Sunday because people are expecting something to be published on Sunday. That's it. It's very simple, right? You have a very clear and simple goal, and that kept me going through everything, no matter if you're sick or if it's too cold outside or reasons that you could find to not do it. You just keep doing it because you have put yourself in mind that if you don't publish, other people suffer. They will not get access to their information, even if it might not be true. It doesn't matter. It depends what story you tell yourself,
mm,
right? Okay, my story is that if I don't do it, people will not be happy. I don't want to make people unhappy, therefore I have to do it regardless of what whatever situation I'm in, right? And then you're gonna keep doing it. That will basically will root you and will allow you to continue doing it for as long as you wish to. You might ask me, okay, but how long? I don't know, until I die, maybe. It's hard to say, right? For now has been this is the 5th year we're doing this. It might be forever, or it might be until the next person picks it up and does it. It's very hard to say when does a mission end. For example, before Last Week in Denmark, I was building a youth pro-European youth association in Denmark called European Youth North Denmark. I was part of that for 8 years, and it was very, very hard at the end to let go
mm,
and realize I'm not so young anymore. I shouldn't be part of a European youth type of organization, and allow others to pursue the mission of the association. So at some point, I think another capacity that we could add here would be
mm,
to learn to let go and allow your mission or your project or whatever you have built to to continue without you at some point.
mm,
It's
mm,
like you create like a huge vehicle, you build it for as long survival rate as possible, and then you just move on. Maybe you build
mm,
another thing, But in the meantime, you have built that thing and you let it go further. And
Gosh,
that
it's
was
killing me. It's too soon. It's like telling a new parent that they have to be ready for their kid to go to college. I'm not there
you
yet.
barely started
Don't
it.
do
My
it.
God, I'm taking. Listen what I said earlier. 8 years it took me for the first project
Yeah,
to let
yeah.
go of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, who knows last week in Denmark how long will take
Yeah.
until I let go to another person to
Yeah.
succeed and continue doing this.
Yeah.
So it's a question of the timing. The right time will come to you. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's early to discuss about Naibo and its next stage.
Yeah. You know, I'll tell you, Narcissus, the thing that I think about when I need to feel anchored, when I start to feel the like that mental, I need that mental toughness from the resilience definition here. I think what I worry the most about is that it won't be like financially sustainable, that I won't be able to pay my own bills and that sort of thing. And I have to remind myself that I would have made this anyway. Like, it doesn't matter whether I end up being able to pay my own bills. I can get another job to support this work. Um, and that, yes, it would be really nice if it would pay my bills, but I would want this anyway. And I'm so proud of it anyway. And it will continue anyway. Um, so I think that that's something to hold kind of dear to you also is, if you feel so strongly about serving a particular purpose or a particular group of people, you probably would be doing it anyway. And it's wonderful if you can make some money out of that. And we have tools to help you do that. But at the same time, uh, for me at least, it's not like my startup didn't work, I'm just going to shut it down, right? It's like, no, every Sunday I'm publishing this newsletter, come rain or shine, like you were saying. So I think the empathy kind of comes into the resilience. It gives you the motivation to be resilient when you're working in that area.
Exactly.
I wanted to, speaking of tools and methods that will actually hopefully help you to make a bit of money from the work that you're doing, especially if you would like that to be your main employment. I just wanted to mention there's this website called the Business Model Toolbox that has a lot of really good tools and models and methods that you can download as templates. And they've gathered these from lots of other websites. It's just sort of an aggregator of business model tools and it gives you the source of where it came from and then usually a template that you can download. So a lot of what I'm about to show you, you can find there. Don't panic if I go through a slide fast because I will. These are all available online. So, one of the most important tools that I use is design thinking. I've already mentioned that. I try to think about things that other people would call setbacks as being good information for me as a designer. This also deals a lot with empathy. We talked about empathy earlier and how empathy helps you define a problem. And then from there, you have ideas about how you might like to solve that. You might try it out with some sort of prototype, maybe like in Narcissus' case, it's, sending out just a big email with a bunch of BCCs at first. And then you find, well, that goes into people's spam boxes. That's not going to work. And so you've tested something and you've gotten information. That's going to go back into, defining the problem, coming up with new ideas. It's this very cyclical process. And in all cases, you need that empathy. In all cases, you need to be redefining the problem, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things are happening sort of all at once in spirals all the time. So it's not a linear process at all. And I really encourage you to use that as your mindset going into this. Every time you get what appears to be a setback, think, okay, thank you for that insight. Now I know I've saved some time on that journey because I can now redirect. So breaking this down, one thing that you can do as you are empathizing, this comes naturally to a lot of social innovators, but it does still help to have a framework to make sure that you're seeing all parts of the problem. So there's something called an empathy map where you really put yourself in the person's shoes that you're trying to serve to think about what are they experiencing, what are they hearing, what are they thinking and feeling, what are they seeing, saying, and doing. It helps if you actually imagine a particular person who has inspired you, and then switch to another person and another person. to really get down deep into that experience. But one of the biggest things that you'll take from this at the end is identifying what are their pains and what are their gains. So what are the things that they're experiencing that are a big challenge? And again, you might intuit this, but go through the activity or go through the exercise and make sure that you're not missing something. And then what is it that they're wanting? Um, it's like the empathy version of like a carrot and a stick model. What are they running from and what are they running toward? And how can you help them get away from the things that hurt and get them toward the things that will relieve that pain or that help them thrive? Another tool that people use, you want to identify what your intended impact is. And I think, again, this is a theme across all of these models. It's really easy when you're an empathetic person to think that you know this. Like, I know what my intended impact is. I know what what the person is feeling because I experience it or I've been around it. But it really is important to sit down and get systematic about it and cover all your bases. What exactly am I trying to do here? Why is there a solution needed? Who exactly is my population? Not just like a broad group. Really try to get down to the detail of your population is. You want to be asking about where your organization will do its work. Is it a small area? Is it a huge area? Is it in person? Is it online? And then what are the specific outcomes that you're wanting to achieve? That's going to support you a lot further on when you are asking, did I actually do the thing that I set out to do? So that's your intended impact. And then once you've done that, you need to think about, well, how am I going to do it? What's the theory that I kind of implicitly hold in my mind about how my service will work to do this thing in the place I want to do it for the people I want to do it, and to meet to actually solve this original question of why it was needed in the first place. So I'm going to actually go into this idea of theory of change a little bit more about the how. Other tools can help you get into kind of breaking down the how. Again, on that same website, there's a social business model canvas. There are lots of different kind of canvas models you can use. There's a lean canvas, there's a business model canvas. I pulled this one because it has that social component and it's actually changed the words of the tool from a usual kind of traditional entrepreneur framing into a social framing. Um, so this is an exercise that you go through and you list what kinds of resources you have. That can be your own skills. It can be the skills of volunteers that you have. What finances do you have? Networks, that sort of thing that you can draw on to make this possible. Your partners and key stakeholders, cost structure. Then you get into the key activities. What kinds of interventions are you interested in doing? What are the channels by which you're going to do them, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a really helpful way when you get to that, how am I going to do this question, to again get really specific and cover all your bases so that you're nice and thorough. And Narcissus, I'm going to hand back over to you for some of these resources.
Yes, so we have 7 minutes, but we can go a bit over time, a couple more minutes. I just want to say you're gonna get the slides from Veronica after this, and in the slides in this slide specifically, you will see all sort of funding aimed at social innovation, let's just say institutions like associations, foundations, social enterprises. Um, Many of them are aimed at Denmark. I know this is also meant for Sweden and Norway and Ukraine, but you'll see there are some of them related to EU. If you're from Denmark, I suggest you go to the website Social Entrepreneur Denmark and literally just read everything there is to read in there, and that will give you quite of a entry point into this world of social entrepreneurship. And maybe I will use this occasion to answer one of the first question that was in the chat. Basically, what's the difference between a social enterprise and a non-profit organization? It's literally the way it's organized. So the social enterprise is still organized like a company. So it is a registered APS, right? Where you had to put 20,000 kronas capital, register it. It has its own birth certificate, its own, let's just say, laws of the company. The only difference is that the profit you're going to make from that APS, it has to be reinvested for the purpose, the greater purpose, let's just say. A non-profit NGO, it's run like an association. So it's recorded, it's registered as an association. We don't have this NGO thing in Denmark. It's just either you're an association or you're a company. In the company, you have purpose to create economic activity. In the association, you have purpose of, well, having fun every Thursday evening with your buddies, discussing the thing you have most in common. So I would say a non-profit NGO is just an association. Every 3 to 5 people in Denmark can get together and start an association in 5 minutes. Of course, if you want to have public funding and access to public funding, which associations open up for you, you need to actually have standard, some sort of standard constitution of the association. So it shows it's a democratic association. It allows anyone to join, and it allows people who want to be part of the board to join the board through a democratic process. That's the important part if you want to have access to public funding, but also social enterprises have access to public funding. There's a lot of EU programs like European Social Fund. Depends how great or how grand your vision is, right? Because if you think about it, the whole, let's take the example of Iværksætter Denmark. I don't know if you have noticed, but in the past 2 years, there has been more and more courses in English about entrepreneurship. They were made through this Iværksætter Denmark program. So basically, there was an organization that has applied to take money from the European Union, from the European Social Fund, to be able to fund the creation of all these workshops for entrepreneurs, so you have free access to them. So it's a grand vision. It's about a couple million euros value project, but it's possible, and it happened. Of course, there's a lot of us smaller fishes involved in the project that deliver the many of those courses. But that was an example of how someone came with the idea, okay, what can I do about entrepreneurship in Denmark? How can I foster more knowledge among and support among the entrepreneurs here? And they came up with that project. So here you can think there's people who look at funding, and based on funding, they design solutions to problems. Those people usually get a lot of money to do something really big. Or there is people who see a problem, they think in their best ability what to do about it, and they start doing it without thinking about getting funding. And then later on, they will see, does this fit anywhere? Maybe. So there's the two paths you can take in there, you can say. And I think that was the answer to the first question. Let's see if we have other questions.
I can maybe add one thing that's pretty important. I think the difference between the two, a huge part of it is who's in control. So if you want to maintain control over the organization, then you want to be in a position to be its owner, essentially, like the CEO that like you won't be fired by anyone because you're the boss, right? Like this is your idea and you're gonna hold it the way that you envisioned it as the leader. Then in a nonprofit, because it's an association in Denmark, it's run democratically, and so you hand over the control and the power to the members who elect a board that makes a lot of the major strategic decisions. And the supreme authority, I think, is how it's translated. The supreme authority is the General Assembly. The General Assembly is all the members of the association together. So the organization could potentially go in a different direction than you intended. But it's collectively owned, and therefore, in a sense, will have, you know, as Narcissus was saying, it will have a life of its own and could potentially move on without you. That's kind of part of the deal. And one of the reasons that public funding is available for that kind of organization is because it's democratically run and it involves the society in being part of owning this kind of social enterprise. So it also depends on the amount of control that's important to you, in terms of, you know, how much you're able to let go, or not let go.
It depends on the whole design, right? From the beginning.
Mhm.
We are now basically kind of at the end of the webinar, but we're open to take a couple of questions. If anyone wants to put a live question, just raise your hand. We can take the question right now. Otherwise, just write your questions in the chat, and then we'll see how many we can answer in the next 5 minutes, let's just say. So you don't stay more than that. We are very, very, let's just say, well, aware of time here in Denmark, right? Everything is well organized and timed, and punctuality is very important to the society we live in. So, do we have anyone that would like to put a live question? Now's the chance. If not, let me check the chat. Okay, we have a one question from Mahina. Denmark is known for innovation, but what does social impact look like in practice? What's one brilliant example of social entrepreneurship that you think the world should know about or start here? My goodness, Elizabeth, that's
Ugh.
quite of a big question.
Ooh, I need to think for a second.
Yeah, of course.
Brilliant example.
A brilliant example of social entrepreneurship. To be honest, in Denmark, there is not there are not a lot of social
Mm,
enterprises. We have there's around 660 social enterprise out of what almost 1 million companies that we have here.
yeah.
So to be honest, there are not that many. But Elizabeth, you have the
Yes, yes.
answer? Go
Okay.
for it.
So I'm not exactly sure whether I think you would define the Aalborg Institute for Development as being a social enterprise. No. Well, it benefited me, I think, through a grant. So
Okay.
the Aalborg Institute for Development has the commercial side where you're paid to support and consult new businesses, startups to develop. But it also has free courses that I think were sponsored by some kind of European fund. Yeah.
Versus
Um,
Denmark, yeah.
and as someone like myself, not having a business background, one of the first things that I sought out was some support understanding business practices and business models and learning about some of these models that I mentioned earlier. And I got so much out of I think it was a 4-week class for international people in Denmark. It was once a week in the evenings, I think, 3 hours in the evening. That just went over all the basics of how you start a business in Denmark
Oh,
specifically.
nice. Our
And
doing business in Denmark with flagship.
right, and it was so great. It was like exactly what I needed. And it was free because you all got a grant. So it sounds like it's not, you wouldn't define that as a social enterprise, but I would say that it's a great example of social innovation. As an international, I was looking around for information, but all of it was for Danes. It doesn't assume that you're starting at nothing when it comes to how businesses are run in Denmark. So well done.
Yes.
You have made
Thank
a
you,
difference.
Elizabeth, for this. I did not expect that, and this was not planned, by the way. Disclaimer. Just so you know, actually, I didn't think of that. Indeed, Aalborg Institute for Development has a social impact. It does not have the label of a social enterprise, and
Mm,
the most of the profit is still going to the owners of it. So
mm.
that's why I wouldn't say that it will ever go towards being a social enterprise. It still needs to stay a
It's a
normal.
social innovation organization. How about that?
Exactly. I would say a
Ah,
social innovation organization that much can be, because to be honest, I already do a lot of the other ones who are social enterprises. I need one to stay more focused on
you
profit,
need to get your money somewhere, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have a last question, two last questions here. Um, what are the biggest social problems we need most from Hin, by the way? We need most urgently in Denmark. What is a
Whew,
good place to read more? Biggest social problems
that's a
we.
values question, I think. Like, I think it depends
Okay.
on what you care about, right? Like, there are tons of social
True.
problems, but it's not so much about what the biggest is. I don't know how you would define that or how you would measure that. Um, However you would measure it would be based on your value system, I think. So I think I think you need to find a social problem you care the most about because that's what's going to sustain you through the the challenging times and keep you motivated and make you a really good, like, part of being a founder of a social organization, social impact organization, is that you need to feel really passionately about it so that you can tell people about it in a way that's compelling. So I think, yeah, the caring about it and empathizing about it is more important, and for me anyway.
Okay, I mean, what I think in here is that it's about the discovery moment. As you
Mm.
notice, a lot of these projects or social enterprises or even associations were born because the founder or the founders met with frustration, right? Like we said earlier, there has to be this discovery moment. It hits you. Whoa, I want to do something about this. So actively searching for it, just like you would search for a business idea, it's not the right way to go, unfortunately. I'm really honest here. Don't do that. Unless, then just think about how you can start a business. Literally, is the same process. Don't do that. If you want to do something about something, it needs to hit you, right? It needs to be something that you yourself experience it to be able to come up with a solution, or just join someone else's project for now until you get hit by that. See whatever you care most about, do that, join that, and then you can maybe come up with something that you would like to lead and bring into this world, right?
That actually reminds me, Narcissus, because volunteering is such an important cultural value in Denmark, volunteer experience is considered legitimate work experience, not in the sense that you get paid, but in the sense that you can put it on your CV and it counts as work experience. So that's not something that I knew until actually pretty recently. So if you're in a period, where you're job searching and you're not making a lot of progress, it might be a good idea. Like, find a social innovation organization that inspires you and see if you can volunteer for 20 hours a week doing, like, bringing your skills and showing your skills and getting that CV experience. Maybe what you need is to have something on your CV that says, I've been working at a Danish organization using my skills. So that's one little insight I wanted to pass on.
Super.
Yeah.
And the last question that we taking today from Isvan Turay. Do I assume correctly that people who found social enterprises normally have another job besides for their living? Uh, to be honest, yes and no. Some people, like for example, in my case, yes, I have my own company next to all these other projects I'm running, and that's how I sustain myself. Um, but I was also in the situation of running an organization where the organization was producing enough money to hire me full time. Of course, at the salary decided by the board. I was at the mercy of the board to be fired or not. So it depends a lot on the model that you have built, right? You either can have like, let's just say, if you're very good at creating stuff, you can easily build a business and then a lot of other things. If you're a builder by nature, you will be able to do that. If you want to work in your passion and work within that project, you need to build it in such a way that is possible, and it is possible. There's a whole sector of people working for nonprofits. So it is definitely possible to be working for your project. So both things can be happening.
I would say one of the words that has been most helpful to me in terms of the financial models is to think hybrid. So in traditional entrepreneurship, because you're designing for profit, the whole goal and how you're designing and redesigning and iterating what you're offering is around what's going to give more profit, right? So it's easier in that way to make sure that profit is what's prioritized. But because in social innovation you're prioritizing meeting a need, it can mean that sometimes, you can have a need that you're meeting that very easily produces money, but because that's not the design goal, it doesn't always. And so you have to start thinking, okay, well, how can this be financially sustainable if the product or service itself isn't generating money for me? And that's where you have to kick in that creativity skill and start thinking, okay, well, maybe it's a mix of things. Maybe I'm going to get some grants. Maybe I'll have a product that I'm selling, or maybe it's like a freemium model. Maybe I'll start several different projects within this whole initiative, and some of them will be funded by grants and some won't. Another version of a hybrid model is to sort of like doing what Narcissus is doing, where you have the organization that is either funded by grants or isn't making any money at all. And then you have a private uh, commercial side where, let's say, you might be doing consulting, and the consulting is what's paying the bills, and essentially you then are kind of funding with your time the rest. So there's lots of different ways to do it, but you would want to think of it more in terms of this hybrid uh, mash of gathering funds for the purpose of serving the need in whatever way you need to. Um, so there's a little hustle in some cases. It's not always a really straightforward uh, model, clean model, the way that it can be with other types of businesses.
I definitely agree with that, and I say that if you can, you should definitely aim to build. You can build your job and a social enterprise at the same time within the same social enterprise. It should not be ashamed of saying, "Oh, I'm doing this for a purpose, but I'm also doing it because I cannot find a job in Denmark." Fair enough, or in Sweden or in Norway. It's not the worst thing to do, and it's not unethical in any way. It's perfectly fine to do that, right? Because in the end, it's you just creating a job so you can have a salary, so you can sustain yourself, so you have energy and desire to continue doing that mission, knowing that even though you might create greater profits in the future, those profits will not go in your pocket. They will go for the purpose that you have set yourself onwards for.